They say a mother's love is unconditional, but what happens when your own son looks into your eyes and sees nothing but a burden, a problem to be solved, an inconvenience to be tucked away behind locked doors, where no one has to witness the slow unraveling of who you once were? I am standing here today to tell you a story that will shake you to your core. A story about the day my son decided I was no longer worthy of living in my own home. The home where I raised him, where I bandaged his scraped knees and stayed up all night when fever burned through his small body, where I sacrificed everything so he could have the life he always dreamed of. You know that feeling, don't you? When you catch a glimpse of confusion in your loved one's eyes, when they ask the same question for the 5th time in an hour, when they forget your name even though you have been by their side for decades. You know the weight of watching someone you love slip away piece by piece, memory by memory, until you wonder if anything of them remains at all. But what you might not know, what no one prepares you for, is the moment when the person you raised decides you are too much trouble, too expensive, too embarrassing to keep around. My name is Margaret, and I have Alzheimer's disease, but I want you to understand something right now before we go any further. This disease may have stolen some of my memories. It may have turned my once sharp mind into something fragile and unpredictable, but it has not stolen my ability to feel, to hurt, to recognize betrayal when it stares me in the face wearing the smile of my own child. The day started like any other confusing morning in my life now, waking up in a bedroom that should feel familiar, but somehow always carries the strange quality of a place I am visiting for the first time. The wallpaper with tiny roses that I chose 30 years ago looks foreign to me most mornings, and the photographs on the dresser show faces I should know but sometimes cannot name. My son David, successful and polished in his expensive suits, had been visiting more frequently in recent months, and I remember feeling grateful even through the fog that clouds my thoughts. He would sit with me at the kitchen table, his phone always in his hand, his eyes rarely meeting mine, but he was there, and that counted for something, didn't it? I would make tea, forgetting sometimes that I had already made it, finding cold cups scattered around the house like evidence of a mind that cannot hold on to the present moment. David would sigh, that particular sigh that adult children make when they are running out of patience, when they are calculating costs and burdens in their minds while pretending to smile. I noticed these things even when my memory failed me, because a mother's intuition runs deeper than any disease can reach. It lives in the bones, in the instincts, in the way you can read your child's face even when you cannot remember what you had for breakfast. He brought brochures one afternoon, glossy and expensive-looking, filled with photographs of smiling elderly people in beautiful rooms with sunshine streaming through large windows. Golden Years Estate, the cover proclaimed in elegant gold lettering, and David spread these brochures across my kitchen table like he was presenting me with a gift, like he was offering me something wonderful, instead of asking me to leave the only home I have known for half a century. He talked about amenities and 24-hour care, about trained professionals who specialize in memory disorders, about how much better I would be in a place designed specifically for people like me. People like me. Those 3 words landed like stones in my chest because suddenly I was not Margaret anymore. Not the woman who raised him alone after his father died. Not the woman who worked 2 jobs to pay for his college education. Not the woman who sat in the front row of every baseball game and school play and graduation ceremony. I was just one of the people like me, a category, a problem with a solution that came in the form of a locked facility where I could be someone else's responsibility. The fog in my mind cleared just enough in that moment for me to understand exactly what was happening, and I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw a stranger wearing my child's face, a man who had already made his decision and was simply waiting for me to agree. I want you to pause right here with me and really feel this moment, because if you are watching this video, you understand this pain in a way that most people never will. You know what it feels like to see the person you love slowly disappear, or perhaps you are the one disappearing, feeling yourself slip away piece by piece while the world around you grows increasingly impatient with your confusion. You know the exhaustion, the fear, the desperate hope that tomorrow might be better even though you know it probably will not be. And before we continue with my story, I need you to know something important. This channel exists for you, for everyone who feels invisible in their struggle with Alzheimer's. Whether you are living with the disease or watching someone you love battle it every single day, if you take a moment right now to click that subscribe button, you are not just following another channel. You are joining a community of people who understand, who see you, who know that behind every forgotten name and repeated question is a human being who deserves dignity and love. We share stories here that television networks ignore, stories that matter, stories that remind us all that we are not alone in this impossible journey. Subscribe now, and let this be the place where you find comfort on the hardest days, where you discover you are stronger than you ever knew, where you learn that even in the darkest moments of confusion and loss, there is still beauty and meaning and hope. David started making arrangements without asking me directly, or perhaps he did ask, and I cannot remember agreeing. But I suspect it was the former because he moved with the efficiency of someone who has already decided and is simply going through the motions of pretending I have a choice. Papers appeared on the dining room table, documents with small print and highlighted sections where I was supposed to sign my name, and I signed them because what else could I do when my own son assures me this is for the best, when he uses that tone that makes me feel like a child who cannot possibly understand what is good for her. The moving day arrived faster than I expected, or maybe it did not, and I just lost track of time the way I lose track of everything now. But suddenly, there were boxes in my living room and strangers packing up my life while David supervised with his phone pressed to his ear, managing me the same way he manages his business deals. The photographs came off the walls, leaving pale rectangles where sunlight had not reached for decades, and I watched as my entire history was reduced to cardboard boxes labeled in black marker. Kitchen, bedroom, personal items, as if a lifetime could be sorted so simply, as if the weight of memory and meaning could be compressed into categories that fit in a moving truck. Golden Years Estate was exactly as beautiful as the brochures promised, all soft colors and comfortable furniture, and that particular smell that all these places have, a combination of cleaning products and something else, something sad that no amount of air freshener can quite cover. My room was nice, they assured me, with a window overlooking a garden and my own bathroom and space for some of my personal belongings, though not too many because space was limited and we needed to be reasonable about what I could keep. Reasonable. That word kept appearing in every conversation, as if my entire existence now needed to be filtered through someone else's definition of what was reasonable for a woman whose mind was betraying her. The staff smiled with professional kindness, the kind that never quite reaches the eyes, and they called me Margaret, dear, and sweetie, and honey, diminutives that reduced me to something small and manageable, something that needed to be spoken to in simple sentences and treated with exaggerated patience. David stayed for an hour on that first day, showing me where everything was as if I would remember, promising to visit regularly even though we both probably knew he would not. And then he left me there in that pretty room with the garden view, left me with strangers who would now witness every moment of my decline, every embarrassing failure of memory, every confused question and repeated story. The weeks blurred together in that place the way all my days blur now, one bleeding into the next with no clear boundaries to separate Tuesday from Thursday, morning from afternoon. I ate meals in a communal dining room where other residents sat at assigned tables, some of them talking to people who were not there, some of them silent and vacant, all of us united in our gradual disappearance from the people we used to be. The activities director, a young woman with aggressively cheerful energy, organized craft sessions and movie screenings and something she called memory care exercises, as if we could exercise our way back to ourselves, as if colored paper and glue sticks could rebuild what Alzheimer's was systematically destroying. I participated because what else was there to do? Folding paper into shapes I would not remember making, watching movies I would not recall seeing, answering questions about my past that sometimes I could answer, and sometimes left me staring blankly while the fog rolled in and took everything with it. David called occasionally, brief conversations where he asked how I was doing in that distracted tone that meant he was doing something else while talking to me, and I always said I was fine, because what was the point of saying anything else? What could he do from wherever he was living his busy, important life? Then came the invitation, delivered to me by one of the nurses who handed it to me like it was good news, like I should be excited. David was hosting a party, some kind of luxury event for his business associates and friends, and he wanted me to attend. He wanted me to attend. Those 4 words sat strange in my mind because why would he want his mother with Alzheimer's at his elegant party? Why would he risk the embarrassment of me forgetting names or repeating myself or asking where the bathroom was for the 3rd time? But the invitation was real, expensive cardstock with embossed lettering, and it specifically included my name, Margaret Chen, and I held that invitation in my trembling hands and felt something shift inside me. Something that had been sleeping, waking up with a sharp and sudden clarity. The party was being held at some exclusive venue downtown, the kind of place David had always aspired to, the kind of place that represented everything he had worked for and achieved, and he was inviting his mother from the nursing home to attend. The nurses seemed impressed, chattering about how wonderful it was that my son wanted to include me, how lucky I was to have such a devoted child, and I smiled and nodded and said nothing about the months he had barely visited, nothing about the way he had packed up my life and delivered me to this place like a package being shipped to a warehouse for long-term storage. I began to plan, and here is something you need to understand about Alzheimer's disease, something that people without it never quite grasp. The fog is not constant. There are moments, sometimes just seconds, sometimes longer, when everything becomes crystal clear, when I am completely myself again, sharp and aware and capable of complex thought. These moments of clarity are unpredictable and precious, and I learned to grab them when they came, to think and plan and remember during those brief windows when my mind belonged to me again. I started paying attention in ways I had not bothered to before, listening to conversations between staff members, watching how the facility operated, understanding the routines and schedules and the small freedoms that even a locked memory care unit cannot completely eliminate. I befriended other residents during my clear moments, learned their stories, understood their pain, and I began to see that I was not alone in feeling abandoned, not alone in recognizing that we had all been tucked away by children and spouses who loved us but could not handle us, who needed us to be somewhere else so they could continue their lives without the constant reminder of mortality and decline. The dress they brought me for the party was beautiful, more beautiful than anything I had worn in years, a deep blue silk that David must have purchased because I certainly had not. And when I put it on the day of the event, I looked in the mirror and saw a ghost of who I used to be, elegant and composed, even with the confusion lurking behind my eyes. The staff fussed over me, fixing my hair and applying makeup, and they talked about how wonderful it was that David was including me in his celebration, how it showed what a good son he was, and I let them talk while that clarity burned bright in my mind, while I held on to every detail of my plan, with the fierce grip of someone who knows the fog could roll back in at any moment and steal everything away. The car service arrived exactly on time, and I was delivered to the venue like a piece of valuable cargo, escorted through elegant doors into a space that took my breath away with its chandeliers and marble floors and tables decorated with flowers that probably cost more than a month of my care at Golden Years Estate. David greeted me at the entrance with a smile that looked genuine until you noticed it did not reach his eyes, and he kissed my cheek and told me how wonderful I looked, and I smiled back and said thank you, and allowed him to guide me into the party as if I were a prop he had arranged for some purpose I did not yet fully understand. The room was filled with people in expensive clothes drinking expensive wine, and David introduced me to several of them, always with the same introduction. "This is my mother Margaret. She is staying at a wonderful care facility. We are so grateful to have found such a good place for her. A wonderful care facility." As if Golden Years Estate was a luxury resort I had chosen rather than a repository where he had placed me when I became inconvenient. And that was when I began to understand why he had really invited me to this party, why he wanted me here among his colleagues and clients and friends. I was not here to be celebrated or included. I was here to be displayed, evidence of his responsibility, proof that he was a devoted son who took such good care of his aging mother. Look how well dressed she is. Look how he includes her in important events. What a good man David must be to treat his mother with Alzheimer's so kindly. I played along at first, smiling and nodding as he paraded me through the room, and I watched the other guests look at me with that particular expression people get when confronted with someone who has Alzheimer's, a mixture of pity and discomfort and relief that it is not them or their parent, not yet anyway. David kept his hand on my elbow as if I might wander off or cause a scene, and he guided me to a table near the front of the room where I was meant to sit quietly and be grateful and not embarrass him. The speeches began, important people talking about business deals and partnerships, and David's impressive accomplishments, and everyone applauded at the appropriate moments while I sat in my beautiful blue dress feeling like an exhibit in a museum, the devoted son's declining mother, proof of his character on display for all to admire. And then came the moment I had been waiting for. The moment when David stood to give his own speech, when all eyes turned to him and the room fell silent with expectation, when he began to talk about his journey to success and the people who had helped him along the way. He mentioned his mother, of course he did, because that was part of the performance, and he spoke about my sacrifices and my dedication and how much I had done for him when he was growing up, and his voice caught with what sounded like genuine emotion, and people in the audience made sympathetic sounds, and some even wiped at their eyes. And he talked about how difficult it was to watch me decline, how heartbreaking it was to see Alzheimer's steal away the vibrant woman who had raised him, and how he had searched for the best possible care because his mother deserved nothing but the best possible care. Golden Years Estate, where I shared a small room with furniture that was not mine, where I ate meals at assigned times with assigned table mates, where every door was locked and every movement was monitored, and I needed permission to do anything beyond sitting in my designated space. This was the best he could do for the woman who had given him everything. I stood up then, in the middle of his speech, and the clarity was sharp as broken glass in my mind, and I walked to the front of the room where David stood at the podium, looking at me with surprise and the beginning of alarm, and I took the microphone from his hand before he could stop me, and I looked out at all those well-dressed people in their expensive clothes, and I spoke with a voice that was stronger than it had been in months. "I want to tell you all something about David," I said, and the room went completely silent, and I saw panic flash across my son's face as he realized he had lost control of his carefully orchestrated performance. This man standing beside me, this successful businessman you all admire so much, he is my son, and I love him, but I need you to understand what loving him has cost me. I raised him alone after his father died. I worked 2 jobs so he could go to college. I sacrificed every dream I ever had so he could build the life he wanted. And when I got sick, when my mind started to fail, and I needed him the way he once needed me, do you know what he did? He put me in a nursing home and he visits maybe once a month if I am lucky, and he calls even less than that. And he brought me here tonight not because he loves me or wants to celebrate with me, but because having his Alzheimer's mother at his fancy party makes him look like a good person. The room erupted in uncomfortable murmurs and shocked whispers, and I saw David reaching for the microphone, but I stepped back and kept talking because I knew the fog could come back any second, and I needed to say everything while I still could. "You want to know what it is like to have Alzheimer's?" I continued, looking directly at the crowd of strangers who were now completely focused on me instead of their drinks and small talk. "It is like drowning in slow motion. It is like watching yourself disappear piece by piece while everyone around you grows tired of your repetition and your confusion and your need for patience. It is like being treated as less than human because your brain does not work the way it used to. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, is seeing the people you love most look at you like you are a burden they cannot wait to be free of. I worked my entire life. I raised my son with everything I had, and my reward for that lifetime of sacrifice is a room in a facility where they serve dinner at 5:30 and lights out is at 9, and I need permission to go outside for fresh air. My reward is a son who loves me just enough to pay for my care, but not enough to actually be present in my life." I could see people in the audience shifting in their seats, some looking at David with questions in their eyes, others staring at their plates as if they could disappear into them, and I felt a savage satisfaction watching my son's carefully constructed image begin to crumble. But I was not finished yet, because this was not just about my anger or my hurt feelings. This was bigger than that. This was about every elderly person who gets warehoused in a facility because they have become inconvenient. Every parent who sacrificed everything only to be forgotten when they needed that love returned. How many of you have parents or grandparents in nursing homes? I asked the crowd, and I saw hands start to rise hesitantly, guilt written across faces. How many of you tell yourselves they are better off there, that they are getting professional care you could not possibly provide, that you visit as often as you can even though you know it is not enough? I am not saying we should not have these facilities, I said more gently, because sometimes the care really is beyond what family can manage. but I am saying that putting someone in a home does not absolve you of the responsibility to truly be present in their life, to visit not once a month but once a week or more, to call not when you remember but on a schedule, to include them in your world even when it is inconvenient. And here is where I need to pause again and speak directly to you watching this video right now, because I know why you are here. I know what brought you to this story. Maybe you have a parent with Alzheimer's and you are drowning in guilt about not visiting enough. Or maybe you are considering a care facility and you feel like you are betraying someone you love. Or maybe you are living with this disease yourself and you feel invisible and forgotten and angry at how your life has shrunk to the size of a single room. I want you to do something for me right now, something that matters. In the comments below this video, I want you to write these exact words. I see you and you are not alone. Just that simple sentence. I see you and you are not alone. Because when you write those words, you are not just commenting on a video, you are reaching across the distance to every other person watching who feels exactly the way you do. You are building a bridge between isolated hearts. You are telling someone else in the darkness that they are not the only one struggling, and maybe, just maybe, your comment will be the thing that helps someone else make it through today. Copy and paste those words right now. I see you and you are not alone. And watch as the comments fill up with people who understand, who have been where you are, who know this pain intimately. Do it now, before the moment passes, because your voice matters and your experience matters, and there are hundreds or thousands of people who need to hear from you today. Back at the party, David had recovered enough to try to take control of the situation, reaching for my arm and attempting to guide me away from the microphone while apologizing to his guests for my outburst, explaining in a strained voice that I was having one of my episodes, that Alzheimer's sometimes made me confused and angry, that he was so sorry for the disruption. But I shook off his hand and I looked at him with all the love and disappointment a mother can hold, and I said loudly enough for everyone to hear, I am not confused right now, David. I am clearer than I have been in months, and I need you and everyone here to understand that having Alzheimer's does not mean I have stopped being human, does not mean I cannot recognize neglect when I experience it, does not mean I do not feel the absence of my only child in my life. You wanted me here to make yourself look good, and instead I am going to make sure everyone here knows exactly what kind of son you really are. The revenge I had planned was not dramatic or violent or even particularly complicated. It was simply the truth spoken loudly in a room full of people my son wanted to impress, and I watched as that truth landed like bombs across his perfect evening. I had prepared something else too, because during my moments of clarity over the past weeks, I had written letters, dozens of them, to David's colleagues and business partners, letters explaining what life was really like at Golden Years Estate, describing the loneliness and the institutional feeling, and the way time stretches endlessly when no one comes to visit. I had enlisted the help of another resident whose daughter actually visited regularly, a woman named Patricia who was sharper than the staff gave her credit for, and she had helped me mail those letters to the addresses I had memorized from David's business cards before my memory started failing. Those letters were waiting in mailboxes all over the city, ready to be opened in the coming days, a paper trail of truth that would follow my son far beyond this one embarrassing party. But even as I stood there watching David's face cycle through shock and anger, and something that might have been shame, I felt the fog beginning to creep back in at the edges of my clarity, felt the sharp focus starting to soften and blur. I knew I only had moments left before I would lose this thread, before I would forget why I was standing at a podium holding a microphone in a room full of staring strangers, and I needed to finish what I had started. I looked out at all those faces and I said, if you take nothing else from tonight, remember this. The way we treat our elderly, especially those with diseases like Alzheimer's, says everything about who we are as a society. These are the people who built the world we inherited, who worked and sacrificed and loved us into existence. And when they need us most, we put them in facilities and visit when it is convenient and tell ourselves we are doing the best we can. Sometimes the best we can actually is enough, but most of the time, we could do so much more if we just decided they were worth the inconvenience. I set the microphone down then, my hands shaking not from disease but from the adrenaline of what I had just done, and I walked toward the exit with as much dignity as I could gather. David did not follow me immediately. still trying to salvage his party, making excuses and apologizing and probably planning how he would explain this to everyone later, how he would spin my public accusation into further evidence of my decline. A few people did follow me, though, I noticed. Older guests who maybe had parents in similar situations, younger ones who perhaps were beginning to recognize their own futures in my words. One woman, elegantly dressed with kind eyes, stopped me near the door and said quietly, "Thank you for saying what needed to be said. My mother is in memory care and I have not visited in 3 weeks. I am going to see her tomorrow." And I nodded and smiled, even as the fog rolled in thicker now, even as I started to lose the thread of where I was, and why I was wearing this blue dress, and why there were tears on my face. The car service took me back to Golden Years Estate, and by the time we arrived, I had forgotten most of what had happened at the party, retained only a vague sense of having done something important, something that mattered. The nurses helped me out of my dress and into my nightgown, chattering about what a nice time I must have had, and I agreed because I could not quite remember if it had been nice or not, could only feel a strange satisfaction humming beneath my confusion like a song I had forgotten the words to, but still recognized the melody of. David did not call for several days, and when he finally did, his voice was tight with barely controlled anger, asking me why I had humiliated him like that. Did I have any idea what I had done to his reputation? How could I be so cruel? And I listened to him rage, and I felt sad, because I could hear in his voice that he still did not understand, still saw my accusations as an attack rather than a plea, still believed that providing financial support for my care was equivalent to actually being present in my life. But here is what David did not know, what I had not told him during my speech because I was saving it, holding onto it like a secret weapon. During those months before he moved me into Golden Years Estate, during all those visits where he sat at my kitchen table scrolling through his phone while I made tea, I would forget I had already made. I had been documenting everything. In my lucid moments, I had written down dates and times, recorded how long he stayed, noted how often he actually looked at me versus his screen, kept a careful accounting of the promises he made to visit more often, and the excuses he gave for why he could not. I had gathered these records with the same fierce determination that once helped me work 2 jobs and raise a child alone, and I had given them to a lawyer who specialized in elder care before my memory got too bad to make such decisions. That lawyer now had documentation of neglect, of a son who took control of his mother's assets and finances in order to place her in a facility, but did not fulfill his part of the bargain to remain involved in her care. The letters I had sent to David's business associates contained not just emotional appeals, but facts, dates, evidence of a pattern of neglect that would be hard for him to explain away as the confused ramblings of an Alzheimer's patient. And the lawyer was preparing to file a complaint with the state, not to get David in legal trouble necessarily, but to force a court-mandated evaluation of my care situation and David's role in it, to put on public record that financial support alone does not constitute adequate care for a parent. This was my real revenge, not the public humiliation at his party, though I admit that had been satisfying in the moment. But this longer-term plan to legally force my son to either be truly present in my life or give up control of my care to someone who would be. I wanted him to face a choice, be my son in action not just in name, or step aside and let social services find someone who would actually visit, actually care, actually treat me like a human being instead of a problem solved with monthly payments. The twist in this story, the thing that will change how you understand everything I have just told you, is something I have been holding back until now, waiting for the right moment to reveal it, because I needed you to feel the full weight of my anger and hurt before you could understand this next part. David called me again last week, and this time his voice was different, quieter, and he asked if he could come visit, really visit, not just stop by for 20 minutes before rushing off to his next appointment. And when he arrived, he sat in my room for 3 hours, and we talked about things we had not discussed in years, and he cried while telling me about the letters he had received, about the lawyer's complaint, about standing in front of all his colleagues and feeling the full weight of his failure as a son. He told me he had been hiding behind his busy schedule, using his work as an excuse to avoid facing the reality of my disease, because watching me decline was too painful, and he did not know how to handle that pain except by creating distance. And here is the part part that broke my heart all over again in a completely different way. David told me he had been terrified I would not recognize him anymore, that the last time he had visited and I called him by his father's name, it had shattered something inside him, made him feel like he had already lost me. So why keep showing up to watch the person who used to be his mother fade away completely? He had been grieving me while I was still alive, grieving the sharp-minded woman who used to help him with homework and give him advice about his career, and he had not known how to bridge the gap between who I was and who I am now. The nursing home had seemed like a solution, a place where professionals who were not emotionally devastated by my decline could provide the care he felt incapable of giving. He thought he was doing the right thing, thought that by ensuring I had a safe, clean place with round-the-clock medical supervision, he was being a good son, and he genuinely had not understood that what I needed more than safety and supervision was him, his presence, his willingness to sit with me even when I repeated myself, even when I forgot his name, even when I asked him the same question 6 times in an hour. My revenge had worked, but not in the way I expected. I had wanted to hurt him the way he had hurt me, wanted him to feel humiliation and shame, wanted him to face consequences for his neglect. And he did feel all those things, but what actually changed was not punishment-driven, it was understanding-driven. The public confrontation and the letters and the legal complaint had forced David to confront truths he had been avoiding, to stop hiding behind excuses and rationalizations, to see clearly that his fear of my disease had caused him to abandon me emotionally, even while convincing himself he was providing for me financially. And now he comes to visit 3 times a week, and sometimes I recognize him and sometimes I do not. And sometimes we have conversations I will not remember 5 minutes later, and he sits with me anyway. He reads to me even when I fall asleep mid-chapter. He brings photographs and tells me stories about my own life that I have forgotten. He holds my hand when the confusion gets bad, and I do not know where I am or why nothing makes sense anymore. The revenge I thought I wanted was public humiliation and forced accountability, but what I actually got, what my plan accidentally achieved, was getting my son back. Not the son from before I got sick, not the boy I raised who remembered everything and understood me perfectly, but this version of David who is learning how to love someone who is slowly disappearing, who is figuring out that presence matters more than perfection, that showing up even when it is painful is what love actually requires. And yes, I still live at Golden Years Estate because the care I need is beyond what David can provide while working full-time, but now it feels less like a storage facility and more like simply where I live while my son remains a constant presence in my life. He advocated for me to have a better room, he checks in with the staff regularly, he takes me out for lunch when I am having good days, and most importantly, he stopped treating my disease as something that ended our relationship and started treating it as something we navigate together. I want to tell you something crucial now, something I need you to hear clearly, even if you forget everything else from this video. Alzheimer's does not erase the person you love. It obscures them, covers them with layers of confusion and memory loss. But somewhere underneath all that fog, we are still here, still feeling, still needing connection and dignity and love. When you visit someone with Alzheimer's and they do not remember your name, you are not visiting a stranger. You are visiting someone whose filing cabinet of memories got dumped on the floor, and they are desperately trying to find the right folder while you stand there waiting. And sometimes they cannot find it. Sometimes the folder is just gone, but that does not mean your presence does not matter, does not mean they cannot feel the love even if they cannot name who is giving it. Every visit registers on some level we do not fully understand. Every hand held and kind word spoken leaves an imprint that might not survive as a concrete memory, but changes something in the texture of their experience. If you are caring for someone with Alzheimer's, or if you have placed someone you love in a facility and you are carrying guilt about that choice, I want you to understand that the facility itself is not the problem. Sometimes we do need professional care. Sometimes the medical complexity or physical demands are truly beyond what family can manage safely, and there is no shame in recognizing those limits. The problem is when we use the facility as an excuse to disappear from someone's life, when we convince ourselves that paying for care is enough, when we let our own discomfort with decline give us permission to stop showing up. You can place someone in professional care and still be deeply present in their life. You can acknowledge that you cannot meet all their needs, and still meet the most important need, which is the need to be seen and remembered and loved by the people who matter most. David learned this the hard way, through public humiliation and legal complaints, and having to face his own failures spelled out in letters to his colleagues. But he learned it, and now our relationship is something real again, instead of the hollow performance it had become. This channel exists to tell these complicated truths, to share stories that are messy and painful and real, to create a space where we can talk honestly about what it means to love someone through decline and loss and the impossible difficulties of Alzheimer's disease. If you have not subscribed yet, I am asking you to do that now, not as a favor to me, but as an investment in yourself and your own journey through this. Every video we create here is designed to help you feel less alone, to give you strategies and insights, and most importantly, to remind you that you are not failing even when it feels like you are, that every moment of patience and presence counts even when the disease steals the memory of it. We talk about the things no one else wants to discuss, the anger and the grief and the profound exhaustion, but also the moments of unexpected beauty, the brief returns to clarity, the love that persists even when everything else is falling apart. Click that subscribe button now and turn on notifications so you never miss a story, because this community we are building here, we need each other. We need to know we are not alone in this impossible experience of watching ourselves or someone we love slowly disappear. The final piece of this story, the last twist that I have been saving until the very end, is something that even David does not fully know yet. Those moments of clarity I have been describing, the times when the fog lifts and I can think and plan and understand exactly what is happening to me, those moments are becoming rarer and shorter. The doctors told David in a meeting I was not supposed to remember but somehow did that. I am progressing faster than they initially expected, that the version of me who planned the revenge at the party and wrote all those letters and set up the legal complaint, that version is disappearing more quickly than anyone hoped. Soon, maybe in months, or maybe in weeks, I will not have these clear moments anymore. I will be fully inside the fog with no windows to climb through back to myself. And knowing this, knowing that my time of being truly Margaret is running out, has changed everything about how I see what happened with David. I spent so much energy on revenge, on punishing him and forcing him to face his failures, and that energy was justified because what he did was wrong and hurtful, and I deserved better. But now, with clarity becoming a rare and precious commodity, I find myself grateful for what the revenge accidentally achieved rather than satisfied by the revenge itself. I got my son back. I got to have real conversations with him again before the disease takes even that ability away from me. I got to feel loved and seen and important in his life for these final months or weeks of being able to understand what that means. And when I am gone, when the fog finally covers everything and the woman I am now disappears into confusion that never lifts, David will have these recent memories of showing up and being present and loving me through the decline, and maybe that will help him forgive himself for the months he wasted being absent. The revenge I planned was supposed to hurt him the way he hurt me, but what it actually did was save our relationship before time ran out to save it. And that is the truth I want to leave you with today, that sometimes the people we love fail us not because they are cruel, but because they are scared, not because they do not care, but because they do not know how to care when caring requires witnessing pain they feel powerless to fix. David could not handle watching Alzheimer's steal his mother, so he removed himself from the situation, and it took public humiliation and legal pressure and the threat of consequences to force him back into my life. But he came back, and that matters more than anything else, that he came back while there was still enough of me left to recognize what his return meant. And if you are someone who has been absent from someone's life because their disease terrified you, if you have been using distance as protection from pain, I am telling you right now that you are running out of time. The person you love is disappearing whether you witness it or not, and you get to choose whether you are present for whatever time remains or whether you wake up one day to discover they are completely gone and you missed your chance to say all the things you needed to say. Go visit your person today, right now if you can, and sit with them even if they do not remember who you are, even if they tell you the same story 5 times, even if being there breaks your heart into pieces. Sit with them anyway, because love is not about protecting yourself from pain. It is about showing up especially when it hurts, especially when you would rather be anywhere else, especially when the person you are visiting seems like a stranger wearing familiar features. They are not a stranger. They are someone you love buried under layers of disease, and every minute you spend with them matters more than you can possibly understand. That is what David learned, and I am grateful my revenge taught him that lesson before it was too late for lessons to matter anymore. I am grateful that when I finally disappear completely into the fog, when I do not recognize him, or remember my own name or understand where I am, he will be there anyway, holding my hand, telling me I am safe, loving me even when I cannot love him back, because I will have forgotten what love is. And if you are someone living with Alzheimer's yourself, if you are watching this video during one of your clear moments, and you are terrified of what is coming, I want you to know that you are allowed to be angry about what this disease is taking from you. You are allowed to want revenge against the people who have failed you. You are allowed to speak truth, even when it makes others uncomfortable. But I also want you to know that underneath the anger, what we really want is connection, is to be seen and loved and treated as human beings for whatever time we have left. Use your clear moments wisely. Say what needs to be said. Fight for the dignity and presence you deserve, but also leave room for forgiveness and grace, because the people who love us are often doing the best they can even when their best is not good enough. We can demand better while still understanding that everyone is scared and confused and hurting in their own ways. My name is Margaret, and I have Alzheimer's disease, and I got revenge on my son by telling the truth at his fancy party, and that revenge accidentally gave me back something more valuable than satisfaction or punishment. It gave me these final, clear months with my child. It gave me the gift of being loved and seen before I disappear completely. And when the fog takes me forever, whenever that day comes, I will go knowing that I fought for myself, that I refused to be ignored or diminished, and that I was brave enough to demand the love I deserved, even when demanding it meant risking everything. That is my story. That is my revenge. And that is my hope for anyone watching who feels invisible in their struggle with this disease. You are seen, you matter, and you deserve to be loved fully and completely for exactly as long as you are here. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise, and do not be afraid to fight for what you need even if fighting makes people uncomfortable. This is your life, whatever is left of it, and you have the right to insist that it be lived with dignity and connection and love. Before I close, I need to ask you one more time to subscribe to this channel if you have not already, because the work we do here matters, and the community we are building could be exactly what saves someone from giving up on a hard day. Click that button now. Be part of this family of people who understand Alzheimer's from the inside, who know what it costs and what it takes and what it means to keep loving when love requires everything you have. And go back to the comments and find all those people who wrote, "I see you and you are not alone." And know that each of those comments represents a real person fighting their own battle with this disease. And together, we are creating something powerful, a network of witnesses who refuse to let each other disappear into silence and isolation. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. And remember that even in the darkest moments of confusion and loss, you are worthy of dignity and love and someone showing up, always.